disaster risk management and climate change. The Latin American and Caribbean region is exposed to many natural hazards whose impacts are already being felt. In recent years, the region has suffered landslides, floods, earthquakes, hurricanes, and wildfires, all of which have resulted in thousands of deaths and injuries, as well as economic losses through damage to housing and public infrastructure. Latin America and the Caribbean is one of the regions in the planet with the highest exposure to multiple natural hazards. These risks are only increasing through the effects of global climate change. Although we cannot prevent natural hazards from occurring, we can and must reduce economic and social vulnerability to these events. According to studies by the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, every dollar invested in risk reduction saves up to $7 in disaster response. The key to achieving these savings is to have a preventive approach that incorporates disaster risk management starting in the initial design phase and continuing throughout the life of any development project exposed to natural hazards. Most of these projects include infrastructure components. So in this video, we will explain, first, what we mean when we say disaster risk. Second, what disaster risk management is and what the current challenges are to its implementation. And lastly, how infrastructure projects should be approached to reduce existing and future risks, including the increased risks presented by climate change. According to the United Nations International Strategy for Disaster Reduction, disaster risk refers to the potential loss of life, injury, or destroyed or damaged assets which could occur to a system, society, or a community in a specific period of time, determined as a function of hazard, exposure, and vulnerability. In other words, disaster risk is the result of the interaction of these three components: hazard, exposure, and vulnerability, and the potential losses to human life and physical damage, including infrastructure and housing. Disaster risk management is defined as a set of strategies, policies, and measures aimed at improving four key areas. 1. The identification and assessment of disaster risk. 2. The implementation of actions or measures for risk reduction. 3. Preparedness practices for response and recovery in the event of a disaster. And 4. Financial protection against this risk. These activities have the explicit aim of increasing people's safety, their well-being, quality of life, resilience, and the sustainable development in a region. So, what are the main challenges currently facing disaster risk management in our region? We will mention 5. First, there is the challenge linked to the increase in the intensity and frequency of extreme natural hazard events because of climate change. The second challenge is linked to urban growth and development. The third challenge is related to inadequate or insufficient socioeconomic development planning, which does not always consider natural hazards nor the growth of cities, both of which can create high socioeconomic vulnerability. The fourth challenge is related to weak governance in this area, which requires a regulatory framework, an institutional structure, and a set of budgetary mechanisms that ensure adequate disaster risk management. The fifth challenge to be addressed is strengthening the technical capacity of professionals in the region, as well as the overall population's knowledge and understanding of disaster risk. So, why is it important to manage disaster risk in infrastructure projects? Because the impact of extreme natural events on infrastructure, such as hospitals, schools, bridges, roads, power plants, and other infrastructure deeply impairs national and regional economic development in the medium and long term. So, how should infrastructure projects be approached to address these challenges? In infrastructure projects, it is essential to incorporate risk assessment into the different phases of the project cycle, from design to implementation, operation, and maintenance. We can summarize by saying that implementing a disaster risk management policy to assess both current and potential future risk, including the impact of climate change and socioeconomic changes in the region, is essential to achieve sustainable development goals, to make quality public investments, and to contribute to every citizen's safety and well-being.